Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Love, Laughs, and Lessons. We have another wonderful guest on today who we're very excited to introduce you to. This is our Let's Talk About Sex series. And today's focus is really going to be about sex and trauma and how to work through that and be like, find your sex life fulfilling, even if we've gone through some traumas, which many of us have. So I'm going to hand it over to Denise Rai, who's the co-host. Take it over.
Yay. Thank you, Dr. Frankie. It's my pleasure, it's our pleasure, I should say, to welcome Dr. Michelle Maidenberg to our podcast today. Michelle runs a private practice in Harrison, New York, and is the co-founder and clinical director of Thru My Eyes, a compassionate nonprofit that offers free clinically guided videotaping for chronically ill individuals who wish to leave lasting messages for their loved ones. In addition to her clinical work, Michelle is an adjunct faculty member at New York University, where she teaches a course on mindfulness. Her commitment to mental health extends to her roles with the American Red Cross Crisis Team and as a board member of the Westchester Trauma Network. Michelle is also a celebrated author, with her award-winning books, Free Your Child from Overeating and Ace Your Life, Unleash Your Best Self and Live the Life You Want. Love the title. Love the book. Yes. So,
Thank you.
and also be sure to check out her TED Talks, and we're going to talk all about her dedication to mental health advocacy, which is awesome and inspiring. And we're thrilled to have you here, Michelle. So welcome, welcome again.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I just heard TED Talks. Like, is that plural?
No. Okay, that's like something you only do once in your life.
Just like, wait a minute, because I've done one too, and I'm like, that's impressive. You did that twice. So yeah, tell us a little bit about, your focus and.
Sure. So I really learned from a lot of different theoretical frameworks, and I developed this ACE method, which is what my book is about, and it's predicated under acceptance, compassion, and empowerment. Yeah, and I talk a lot about how our brains are formed, from a neuropsychological and neurophysiological kind of level, so that people understand what we're up against.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just who we are and our experiences, but it's the way our brain is wired that we need to also understand, which is very critical in understanding ourselves. And then I really talk a lot about our values, which really helps in our decision making, empowers us to really live the life we want to. And that is the foundation of, if we are very grounded and aware of our core values, it's a guide to our actions, all different actions. And then I go through acceptance, compassion, empowerment, and talk about the barriers. There are so many barriers that get in the way of us being a really cultivated, full human, and then talk about how to integrate. So what skills do we need to integrate this information? And then I end off, each chapter with a guided meditation, which has a QR code. I'm all about meditation, mindfulness practice, really being in the present moment, finding your authentic self. Often there's a smoke screen. A lot of things kind of get in our way. And we really need to understand that. And life is so fleeting and so short. Can't say that enough. I see it, unfortunately, in my practice so much, things that happen that are so unexpected that we have no control over. And every single day is so critical, so important, so precious. And we know that. I mean, I see with my kids, I look at them, I'm like, how did you get that age? I mean, right. It's like, what just happened?
Where'd the time go?
Yeah. So we don't have time to waste, not even a moment.
Yeah.
So live it like it's your last. I always say every day, just squeeze the most out of life, even when it's hard. Find the positives. Look,
Well, the hard is positive, by the way. The hard is positive because it's where we really learn our lessons in life, and it really helps to understand where we're at and our journey forward. People always have like these regrets, like, why did I do that, back then? Or like, what was I thinking? Or, deep, deep shame that comes from that. And I always say that was part of your past, and that was part of your journey, and that was part of your process. right? And you could really see, if you look through your journey, you could see why you made the decisions you made during that time and where it's led you to. So I think like every person needs to write a memoir, literally, because you could see that
Mhm.
process. It's
Yeah.
it's fascinating.
Read your own story will give you more insight into who you are.
Ah, totally.
Why don't we remember that the heart is positive? Because the heart is just hard.
Yes.
It's all
Well,
growth, right? Growth opportunities. You know,
but that's where when I talk about circumventing emotional avoidance, that's where
Yes,
that comes from. It's always avoiding negativity, right? It's always avoiding the discomfort. It's avoiding the danger, our perceived danger.
that's right.
Like, who likes to feel angry or sad or disappointed or frustrated or whatever comes up? We want to avoid those feelings like the plague.
Hmm.
They're so, because not only do they, kind of give us negativity, but we feel it in our bodies. Like
Yes.
when I'm feeling anxious or I'm feeling worried or scared, like I literally feel it right here in my chest. I could
Yeah.
feel it. I close my eyes, I could identify, and like I don't want that. So it's not even that. Like we have it, and then we struggle with it because we have then thoughts about the thoughts and feelings about the feelings and thoughts about the feelings and feelings about the thoughts, and it just spirals, and then we end up so stuck, so stuck, and we feel so helpless, and we feel like we have absolutely disempowered.
what about the anger part where like there are people who tend toward anger because it energizes them, it makes them feel strong and protected?
You're talking about me.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
I'm one of those chicks, by the way.
What,
Oh my
tell us
God.
what that looks like. Explain that though.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's me. That, like, in a nutshell. When I grew up, I had a lot of adversity growing up. I did. I had a lot of adversity. I came from, intergenerational trauma, like severe trauma. My parents, again, were very immature. Were not cultivated emotionally by any means, and I could go on and on. I went to 5 different elementary schools. My parents divorced when I was 3. Again, I could go on and on. So I felt completely lost. I felt like I wasn't heard. I wasn't, I was, again, I didn't have control over anything because I was a kid. Like, what do you have control over? You depend on adults that are supposed to be protecting you and providing safety.
Mhm.
So when you're in that situation, it leads to chronic, like, attachment, challenges, loneliness, fear, and I could go on and on. So of course, right, what did I do? I gravitated towards anger because that made me feel empowered. That made me, but of course, it's a false sense of empowerment, right? So if I would have tapped into sadness and disappointment and disempowerment, guess where I would end up? I would be depressed and I wouldn't be
Mhm.
able to function. And I
Right.
probably would have ended up towards substances or who knows what, like literally. I know I would have, but I went in the opposite direction, luckily, and I repressed, which is, I could definitely slip into that like that. You know what I mean? Yeah. Disconnected, and anger, right? So all the thoughts I had, and I was just talking about this just before because I was in my own therapy. I was talking about how when I was younger, I must have been in my brain very vengeful, very rageful at the people who hurt me. And that's what made me feel like I had power. And that's what made me feel like I could get through whatever I was going through at the moment. But that comes up for me now as an adult.
Mhm.
And what happened, what I'll just tell you what happened. I had, kind of a little thing with somebody, right? And I I can't help it. But what keeps coming in my mind is I want to hurt him. Like I want to make him feel bad for what he said. I want to make him feel bad for what he did. Why? Because if he feels bad enough, he's not going to do it again, right?
Mhm.
So I'm protecting myself. And also, um, if he feels bad, then I feel stronger, then I'm doing something, like I'm being proactive in some way, which again is ridiculous because that's not the case at all. And what we know about people is when you induce guilt and shame in them, that's not going to make them really think about their actions,
Right.
because that's when people protect themselves and they go into
Defensive.
their core wounds, they get defensive.
Yeah.
But what actually allows people to contemplate and to evaluate and to assess is when they're able to sit with the feelings. So being kind actually, and being forgiving and expressing where I'm at and listening and hearing and exchanging, that's what's going to lead the person to really be more compassionate towards me. Let's be real about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But my brain just like spins and goes into that place. And I have to literally like catch myself and be like, no, I'm not that little girl. Like, I don't, that's a false sense of empowerment. Like, I need to be authentic with my feelings right now. So, what I do, so you're asking, what do you do with this?
Yeah.
What I do, okay, is I say to myself, because I know that's where I slip and slide. I know. So, I say to myself, what am I sad about? What am I fearful about?
Uh-huh.
And that goes from anger into really authentic feelings that I could address. And I could act mindfully and based on my core values rather than my thoughts and feelings. We never, ever want to act on behalf of our thoughts and feelings, ever. We
Wow.
want to be able to act on our values.
Which is why you got to take a deep
Powerful.
breath, right? And slow down. Because
Slow
when
down.
you're immediately responding to like an escalated situation or there's a tension, there's no time to think. Like your frontal lobe is
Completely.
hijacked by your
That's right.
amygdala.
That's right. And I had a woman here yesterday and she's going through a really tumultuous divorce with a man who, has narcissistic traits, we'll call it, personality traits. And he's brutal. He really is brutal. And like my heart goes out to her, like literally what she shares with me, like, and she has 2 kids and all of that. And she keeps on getting like possessed. She literally gets possessed and then yeah. And then what do you think happens? She spills over and then she feels immense guilt because she spills over in front or toward her kids.
Yeah.
And that goes counter to her values. It's counter to her values. So not only is she sitting with the contempt and the suffering from him, then she has suffering on her own accord because of her spilling over.
That's right.
It's like a double whammy, she gets sandwiched. And we stopped and I said to her, interesting, like, you told me that he emailed you all of these like little digs. I'm like, you're doing the same thing. And she looked at me and she was like, oh my gosh, I am.
Wow.
I was like, how do you feel about yourself? Is that who you want to be? And she was like, gosh, no. She started tearing because she realized that I said, maybe you share that part. Maybe there's a part of you, right? That's a projective part that's coming out and triggering you, that's causing you to behave in the same way. And that's what disturbs you so much about his behavior, because you share that part.
Yeah.
And she was like, oh gosh, and then I said to her, we need maybe a cue or something to create that space. Like, what could you say to yourself? And I gave her a suggestion because I always like to say crazy making, because that, like, where you literally feel like so dysregulated in that moment, and I think she came up, I forgot what she came up with. She came up with another word that spoke to her because like we were kind of, and we did that with her kids when she got a little kind of uptight and dysregulated with her kids, and it worked. She was like, oh my gosh, when I say that to myself, it works. And I take a halt, and I've done it a couple times. I'm like, well, we need to use that cue with him too.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
It's a
And
reflex. It's like you're not
Yes.
even thinking, you're just reacting.
Just react.
So there's got to be something, like you said, you create that space, something to give you pause. If it's like halt, 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 you know what I mean? Whatever it is for you, a term, right?
Yeah. Well, I even said you could use a self-compassion exercise too, right? Because we're never taught how to be self-compassionate. We're taught how to be compassionate towards others. We're not acculturated that way, ever. No one teaches. We don't learn in school. We don't learn from our parents typically, the way they communicate towards us, etc. And again, I could speak about this from today until tomorrow. But I said, touch is such a beautiful way to connect with ourselves, and we don't do that often enough. And I gave her a suggestion, if you put your hands on your face, right? And if you close your eyes, again, if you just do it, it feels a little, right? But if you close your eyes and you really feel the touch and you're able to integrate that and to appreciate, right? Compassion towards yourself in that moment for your suffering, right? That gives you space. Or, putting your arms, I always like the butterfly and doing like a bilateral stimulation. There's thousands of exercises. There's a lot in my book, obviously, but there's so many exercises that we could do to create that space. And it's more than creating space, because that's one part of it, because we need to attend to our cognition, which is our brain, right? Which goes into automatic responses, and familiar and comfortable responses, because that's part of our neural pathways. That's one part of it. But the other part of it is also like our polyvagal system. And right, we need to be aware of our nervous system, what's going on in our body.
Yes.
So we have to take care of all parts of that, our automatic responses, our body, our mind, and attend to all of those things if we're going to really act mindfully and we're going to really cultivate a life of being our best self.
So a lot of this is education, right? It's like I tell my clients, we want to give you a toolkit. You have to have a backpack of tools and knowledge to understand what's happening, because there's like the nervous system, polyvagal theory. There's just so much that we can do to manage the
Yeah.
traumas that we've all been through trauma, like even, to varying
Yeah.
degrees.
I
Yeah.
just wrote an article last week because I'm a blogger for Psychology Today. And I always try to extrapolate, like, when I hear clients or, patients bring up certain issues or something's going on, out there in the world or whatever, like, again, it spurs me to write something about it. But that's exactly what I wrote about. I wrote how trauma affects our relationships. And the first thing I said is that we all fundamentally have trauma and stuckness. And it could be a little t or a big T, but we all have some trauma,
I
whatever that
like
is.
that. I haven't heard that described that way.
Oh,
Little
yeah.
T or big T.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it leads to our stuckness in some way. It's part of like the rubric of our humanism, and we need to be accepting of that. When I say to somebody, close your eyes and bring up a memory that was painful or something that like sticks with you. Everyone has something to say. Who doesn't have something to say? Like literally, right?
Those moments we have, all of a sudden, it's like, wow, that was a moment that stuck
Yeah,
with us.
that's right. And the people who come in, by the way, and say, "Oh, I had a perfect childhood and everything was wonderful and my family was like amazing." I'm like, okay. Yeah. Then why are you having like these like work, issues? And why are you having those kind of interpersonal relationship challenges coming up for you? Like, I don't know about that. Like maybe you need to kind of rethink that.
Well, we
So we
defend
also
against it, right? We're like protecting our family. Like a lot of times it's our immediate family, it's our parents, our closest relatives that our earliest experiences of trauma are around, and there's shame. So we protect them.
totally. And I was just talking to a woman just the other day. She's in her marriage for 20 years. And now she realizes she's unhappy. And she's like, I don't understand how I stayed in this relationship, because she sees how she was really not attended to and she was disrespected. And there were a lot of things that went on, excuse me, that would cause her to feel, disrespected. And I said, wow, your values are so strong. You should be so proud of yourself. Like, I honor you. And she was like, what are you talking about? I was like, look how strong your mind worked in order for you, right, to pay attention and to be so committed and invested in your family. That your mind tricked you into believing, okay, or tolerating what was going on because you love your kids so incredibly much and you believe fundamentally in the foundation of a family unit. Like, wow, that is something to be so proud of.
Absolutely.
I honor that part of you. I so honor it. And she was like, wow.
You probably never heard that ever.
That's right. And we
No,
never give
no.
ourselves credit for things that we think that we're doing wrong, right? Because there is
Mhm.
only, for some reason, a wrong or a right. There's no in between.
That's
Yeah.
a good point. Totally. Yeah, we're very unidimensional. Like our brain works in black and white thinking.
Totally.
It works in this, yeah, it completely all the time.
Okay, so I want to get to sex.
Yes.
So like I know in my practice, It
Yeah.
comes up a lot where people just don't realize where their blocks are around sex. They don't understand why they're feeling the way that they're feeling. They don't know why they don't experience the desire that they hear about, that we hear romanticized all over the media, right? Like
Mhm.
we're supposed to feel this desire. We're supposed to be comfortable in our body. All these ways in which, right? We're supposed to be so
Yes.
sensual and so present and open, and all of that is hard. So like people who have trauma, right? They disconnect from their bodies. They don't know, they can't trust the way that they're feeling or the way that they're thinking. So like maybe just sort of anything that
Sure.
you can give our listeners in terms of better understanding themselves and how to kind of grapple with
Sure.
that and overcome maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna actually jump off of what you said, because you said a couple of things that were really important. First of all, you said the word supposed to. Okay. So I always say, like, I tell people, stop shooting themselves. I'm like, stop shooting yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what we do. It's supposed to be this way. It's supposed to be that way. Where do we come up with these shoulds and supposed tos and whatever? It's how we're acculturated, in society based on our family of origin and so forth and so on. I could go on and on and on. And we're all different. We're all different, in certain religions, being sexual and showing, yourself sexually is actually right forbidden, or it's shameful, or whatever the case is. So we have to really understand like the messages that were sent in general, and what our shoulds are and what our supposed to's are,
Mhm.
because that's a barrier in and of itself. That's going to automatically impact on the way we think, feel, and behave. So that I want to say the first thing. The second thing I want to say is sex isn't about sex. Sex is about intimacy. We're talking about
Nailed it.
intimacy. We're talking about vulnerability.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you think about the act of sex on every level, has to do with intimacy. You're showing another human being your naked body. Okay. That has to do with your body image. That has to do with your confidence. That has to do with 1,001 different things. Your performance, okay, has to do again with those things. Connecting to somebody in such an integral, intimate way. I mean, they're like vulnerability out the window. I mean, it's like, woo, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So, I can't even tell you. I was just talking to somebody and they said to me, oh, I was with this person for, 9 years, and we broke up. And, I'm kind of shameful to tell you this, but she never had an orgasm the entire time that we were together. And I was like, interesting. Like, did you guys talk about it?
Mhm.
What was that? And he was like, not really, like, what was that
Why was
like?
he ashamed? Because he thinks it was his duty to get her there?
Well, so that happens sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if you
Okay.
think about that, right? Like if there's a partnership and somebody, for whatever reason, is having a challenge, right? Especially if it's something that they're doing collaboratively,
Mhm.
he's going to take some ownership of that and blame himself. So, yes, there was partly like, should I be doing something, that's going to, help her with that? Or am I not doing something that's allowing that to happen? Or confusion. It's also confusion, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And then also, um, fear, right? Like, what if I try and it doesn't happen? Does that mean something like, do we have to break up? Or does that mean something about our intimacy? There's so many things that come up that get in the way of that. Um, Relative to trauma, so that was the next thing I wanted to say. Yes, trauma affects us in every way. Again, in terms of our physiological health, in terms of our psychological health, in terms of the way that our body reacts to stress, in terms of our nervous system, in terms of our perceptions of ourselves, the other person, the world. I mean, I could go on and on and on. There's an amazing book, if anybody's interested. It's called The Body Keeps the Score by Vanderkalt. It's kind of the classic book on, trauma, but it does such a great, I just actually re-listened to it because I felt like I wanted certain components to focus on. Yeah, it affects us in all different kinds of ways. Keep in mind that also, if we experience trauma, we have a set of adaptations and coping skills. that help us to survive. And again, those are things that if we don't heal those parts, they're gonna spill over. We're gonna carry, it's kind of a suitcase, right? We kind of have the suitcase that we have since we're little, and we fill the suitcase, and right, our nervous system gets formed, and it's gonna look to repeat whatever, right? Because that's what's familiar and comfortable. And unless we make new neural pathways, we're going to repeat those patterns of behavior. That's just the way it is. And guess what? People are going to show up in our lives throughout our lives for the rest of our lives to try to heal us. It's going to come in different shapes, forms, sizes. You're going to keep having that lesson and lesson and lesson. So you're not going to be able to perform and be intimate and vulnerable in the way that you want to be if you don't do the healing. And that absolutely affects sex, because that's where vulnerability and intimacy is like so formative if you think about it.
Okay, so where do we begin? Because it's like, I'm thinking, right? I'm a psychologist like you, and I can see the path. I know there's so many different ways to, work through all of this stuff. But like, if somebody's listening and it's just like, oh my gosh, this is so big, where do I even begin? What would be your recommendation?
Yeah, you know what? I think that's what deters people sometimes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. I always say it's so scary. Well, it's scary and it's painful. I mean, I have to like emphasize that. It's
The
scary and
suffering
painful.
is
Yeah.
where growth is, right? Like I would say,
Yeah.
don't be afraid, lean into it, right? But our natural instinct is to push it away because it's so, it's hard.
Well, it's not even a natural instinct. It's even the way we're wired. I say this fundamentally, like it's the way we are wired, avoidance, avoidance, avoidance. That's kind of the way we're wired. So that's, my whole entire TED talk is about that, circumventing emotional avoidance, because that's what I talk about. Now, think about this, because I always like to use metaphors. If you're running a race, okay, or right, you're not going to run, let's say 26 miles automatically. You're going to very incrementally and very slowly build up. Because if you don't, guess what's going to happen, right? You're going to get injured. You're going to lose steam. You're going to get frustrated with yourself. And I could go on, right? And we see this, like when people, New Year's resolutions. Oh, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to change my lifestyle. Right? And you have like a flood, like they depend on this because they're flooded with like all these memberships, right? Guess what happens? People are like all motivated, inspired, and gung ho. They like go for 2 hours, and then they're Charlie horse, etc. And they're like, oh, this is not for me, right? This hurts. I don't like this, etc. Right? It happens all the time with most things that we do. We can't just jump into the cold water. We can't do it. We have to do it slowly and incrementally. And not only because our bodies, our minds, all of those things have to get used to it. That's the way, again, if we're actually respectful and honoring our bodies and minds and the way we are actually constructed, we're not going to just jump into it. It doesn't even make sense. So we have to take small baby steps. And what does that look like? It could be sitting literally for 3 minutes a day and just checking in, doing a body scan, checking in with yourself. It could mean like doing a self massage, right? And checking in with how that feels, and, maybe journaling. There's so many things that we could do very slowly and incrementally. What I do when I have people really kind of get into some of the very core feelings, I'll first start out with doing it with them in the office. Right. So I'll see if somebody becomes tearful. I'll say, can we take just a minute? Can we just like take just a minute? Like, do you notice, I just saw kind of a shift in your body language, in your facial expression. Did you notice that shift too? And they'll say, yeah. And I'm like, well, what's going on? What do you think caused that? Like what allowed that to happen? What's going on for you? And they're like, I don't know. Okay, that's okay. Well, let's take a second to explore it a little bit. Like, let's honor it. It's here. It's showing up, right? And you probably don't even notice it sometimes. Just passes. Yeah. So let's take a minute. What feeling is connected to that? And sometimes people can't even connect to their feelings because they don't even know what that is or looks like. And I'll help them to do that, right? Or what thoughts are coming up. And generally, what happens? It's so interesting. People will say thoughts, people will say feelings instead of thoughts.
Mhm.
You know, one that I always laugh at, people is like, I feel fat. I'm like, I don't know. Is that a feeling or is that a thought? Like, what does that even mean? Right. And when we have feelings, guess what? If I say that I feel fat, you know what that means? That means I am completely hopeless. I am completely helpless. There's nothing I could do about this and I'm stuck.
Yeah.
If I say, if I say I am fat, which if you have extra fat, you do, that's just, you know, right? Yeah,
Mhm.
it's a physiological thing. Okay. But there's things you could do about that. You could learn to change, right, the way you eat, and you could learn to, like, you know, acclimate to exercise, and you could learn to increase your confidence and connect to your body.
Mhm.
There's so many things you could do, but when you say you feel something, that's the end of the line. So it's also teaching people, you know, these fundamental skills so that they're able to make these changes, which we're just not even aware of often, you know? So yeah, so again, there's so much to this. I could go, like I said, I could speak for hours and hours and hours.
So I think those are good recommendations, though. That's a good jumping off point, which is like start journaling and like don't be critical about what you're writing, how you're writing, the grammar. I'll tell clients just free associate.
So what I'm just going to say one thing. It's not about not being anything, okay? Because that's where we fall into our pitfalls.
Explain
Don't
more.
don't be critical.
Okay.
I can't tell you not to be critical. If your brain is critical, it's going to be critical. Like if your brain has always been critical, guess what? It's going to be critical. Like that's okay. I don't have a problem with your brain being critical. Just notice it.
Mm. I'm
Go
being
and go with
critical.
it.
That's right. I'm being
Okay,
critical. This is my
I'm being
critical
critical.
self.
Like
This is
okay,
how
show
I'm,
it.
yeah.
This is how I've protected myself my whole life. I get it. Like it's showing up. It doesn't want me to fail. It wants me to write exactly the right way. So I get the most out of it. And I'm healing myself, you know,
But
right?
also the idea of like, oh, it has to be perfect because somebody's going to notice I'm flawed. There's imperfections. So like no one's looking at this diary. No one's like, this
Right.
is your safe place. Just write and notice what it is that's coming up for you, right? So you're suggesting be like observing, self-reflecting, like being in there.
It's literally noticing. Like I make a distinction between the thinking mind and the
Mm.
observing mind.
Mhm.
And I teach people this, and it's such a small little skill, but it is like so life-changing because we all fall into this. I mean, how many times, right? I'll have people come to my office and I have like a little mirror and I'll have them stand in front of the mirror and I'll say, what do you see? And what do they do automatically, right? They won't say like I have a big nose. They'll say I have a big ugly nose that, you know, that people think are ugly or I don't know, whatever. And I'll be like, okay, that's a thinking mind. Let's go back to the observing mind. I have a big nose, right? It's the judgments and it's the
Mhm.
criticizing and it's the add-ons. It's the add-ons. That's the problem. It's the add-ons. Like
Mhm.
having a critical mind or me, like I said before, being vengeful in my mind doesn't mean that I'm a mean person, right? It means that I'm having like an angry, fearful thought, but that doesn't make me a mean person. And if I could notice that, I could also tap into my vulnerability,
Mhm.
right? And I could tap into how sad I am at this moment that I'm feeling so disempowered,
Mhm.
that this really critical thought that is so not my authentic self is coming up to protect me. Gosh. And then I could tap into the compassion and I could tap into what I need for myself. Like, what do I need in this moment of suffering? Like, what do I need? Right. And it just frames things so differently. So you can have access to your authentic self and who you want to be.
That's so beautiful. Oh my God.
It is, you know, like I'm talking, like as I'm talking to you, I actually feel like
Yeah.
I feel it, like right here. I
So did
literally
I.
feel
That's why
like
I was
it's
like,
almost
oh.
making me tearful. Like literally, I
Yeah, this is helpful. This is good.
Yeah.
Um, just another thought. I know you had suggested doing a body scan, some breathing. The other day, my coach at the gym was like, Frankie, have you ever thought about like just taking 52 deep breaths every day? Just 52, stopping. And I'm like, oh my gosh, just taking one deep belly breath is hard enough because we're right. It's shallow breathing. We're all breathing up here. And he's like, just try it. And I did. And it's like, you're sitting there for like 10 minutes doing this deep breathing, but it gets you really centered and really clear. It was just amazing how, because air doesn't get down there.
Nope, nope. It doesn't. And even with the present moment awareness too, because I think you're also talking about that. Like
Yeah.
I had an experience last night. I was feeling a little kind of not myself, a little dysregulated, whatever. And I said, you know what? I need to tap into kind of joy. Like I need to tap into laughter. I need to tap into something. And I literally, I sat there and it was so much fun. Like I have a little puppy. So, I have 4 dogs actually, but she's my like support dog, I feel. So I just sat with her and she's the cutest little thing. And I just took a ball and I was throwing it back and forth with her. And she's so funny because she goes and she grabs and she comes back, and then she'll run back and forth. So I can't grab her. And then she'll just all of a sudden like lay back, like, on all fours for me to rub her belly. And I did this for literally about like a half hour. And, but I did it with intention. I was like intentionally thinking about how I felt. I was looking at her and appreciating kind of even the way that she like ran and her energy and like whatever. And it felt so connected and lovely.
Yeah.
It was riveting. Like literally it was so riveting just to be in that
Meaningful.
moment and that experience. Yeah. Yeah. And literally she's a little dog, but I felt so connected to her. Like I felt so connected to her.
So we're talking about mindfulness, right? And just
Oh
really
yeah.
being aware, noticing the small things, being intentional.
It takes moments. If I tell you, it takes moments. It's so easy. Like sometimes, like, in my office, which you could see the shades are down, but when the shades are up, because it's the summertime. So if the shades are up, gets too warm in my office, but, but it oversees a huge park. It's beautiful. Like when the shades are up and it's not too hot. And sometimes literally in between session or whatever, I'll just like glare out my window because there's these beautiful trees. Sometimes I'll look at the cars, on the highway, sometimes I'll look at the trees. Sometimes I'll just look up at the sky for like moments and it recenters me. And that's all it takes. Literally, that's all it takes. People think you have to like, sit on a cushion, you have to be there for hours and you have to like do all these things. And it's not, you don't have to do all that. Like literally, that's not what trains your brain. And by the way, I teach a 15-week course on mindfulness. There is evidence-based research. I mean, this is the most fascinating thing. And now because of MRIs and this advanced technology, it changes the structure of your brain.
Yes.
Like it actually replenishes our gray matter in our brain. There's nothing else that does that.
How long does that take?
So there's a lot of studies that are done. People say it's like, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. It really, what? Everything that you do helps with that. I could tell you, and this is like, I do a lot of personal work, obviously. I sometimes, because I do a lot of work on triggers, and that's actually going to probably be my next book, but because I'm thinking about that. But sometimes where I ordinarily would be triggered and have a reaction, I don't get triggered anymore. Like literally, and I sit there sometimes and I'm like confused. I'm like, why didn't I just like get triggered? Like, why didn't I just have a reaction? Like, I'm like, what just happened? Like, it feels weird because I'm not angry or I'm not frustrated or, so I know that I have literally changed the structure of my brain. And that is like wild. That is absolutely wild because listen, based on my history and all the years that I did that, like it is so hard to change that, and the thing is, there's so many books out now on habit changing, by the way, which,
Yeah.
I have them actually lined up over here on my little desk because I read all them. I love them. But fundamentally, the thing that we haven't really we haven't really solved is how to maintain things over time. That is where we falter. We can make changes as humans, But the problem is we have a hard time sustaining change over time. That's where we have a really challenging time.
Even
So
with
to keep it
repetition?
consistent.
Yeah,
Consistency.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when we go into our wounded parts and places, we just resort back, that's just an automatic response. And our brains are so protective that it remembers. It literally, preserves that memory. Like if I ask somebody, and it's so fascinating to me, like I'll ask somebody, what's, the saddest memory that you have or something that was, a source of suffering for you. And they'll be able to rattle it off to me. And they'll also like be able to connect what feelings they had when they had it. And then I'll say, what was the most exciting, like joyful, whatever, and have them connect. You can't connect in the same way.
Yeah.
You just can't. It's
I think
impossible.
It's
Yeah.
from memory, but not from feeling. You
That's right.
know that happened, but it's
Yes.
not something deep that you feel. You know,
The
that's so
pain,
true.
the
Yeah,
pain you do, but not the
not the
joyfulness.
joy.
And that's due to self-preservation, right? So that
Well, it's the protective part. It's it's
yeah.
literally the neurophysical component of our brain
Yeah.
Mm.
because of the protective instinct.
Yeah.
That is what that is.
Survival. We are
Yes,
wired for
for
survival at
survival.
all costs, and no matter how much work you do, it like that, is it the reptilian part of your brain, right? It just like it's
Correct.
still there. It will be there forever.
And it needs to be there.
Forever.
That's right, because it has a grand
Well,
purpose, right?
Well, the other
Yeah.
thing, I have people like, I appreciate that part of my brain. And
Yeah.
I really teach people to appreciate that. Like, would you not want to be protective? Like, that's a good thing.
Right.
We need that.
Right.
We need that mechanism.
Yeah.
However, we don't have to be hyper vigilant.
Mhm.
What I explain is we're not going to like shut off the valve. We're not going to shut the light switch. We're going to only turn it so that we could relieve suffering. That's all we're going to do. We're going to turn down the dial a little bit. That's all. And that's all you need. That's fine. And by the way, you don't need to be different than how you are because you are fundamentally wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm
You
enough.
are whole. Yeah.
And also you're speaking to the idea that even no matter how much work we do, there are going to be moments where there are lapses. We're imperfect.
We're always evolving. We're always maturing. We're always developing. Like, listen, I'm 53. I don't know how old you are, but like when I was 20 and 30 and 40 and all right, I'm always changing. My life is changing. My priorities are changing. My relationships are changing. Always. I'm not the same person I was, and I'm not going to be the same person 5 years from now. I hope I'm not. Right?
Yeah.
53. You don't look that shocking. Okay, whatever you're doing, maybe you can give us those recommendations too.
Thank you. 4 kids. 4 kids.
Oh my
4
goodness.
kids.
Amazing.
4 kids, 53.
Wow. Michelle, so tell us how can folks connect with you? It sounds like you do group programs. It sounds like you work one-on-one. Give us a little snapshot of what that looks like and how they can find you on social media and so on.
The best place is my website, which is my full name, which is Michelle with 2 L's and Maidenberg. Like I said, I'm a Psychology Today blogger, so I always publish at least monthly, and it's on all different topics. It tends to be self-help and mindfulness, and it could be parenting. It could be something that's going on in kind of mainstream media. So you could subscribe to that. I also do a guided meditation on my YouTube channel every Thursday morning at 11 a.m. So that just came out this morning. There's a new one every single Thursday. And yeah, I mean, all the information about me is on social media. You can find me.
Amazing. Terrific.
Oh, and one more thing, because I have to say this. My nonprofit, which is such a huge passion of mine, I'm trying so badly to restructure because I used to offer it. It was kind of very local, and I really want to offer it on a national level because I've done over 300 videotapes, and it is so therapeutic for people, for families. And I mean this, I am so willing to partner with anybody who would like to partner because I need to do marketing and I need, it's funding. I have a platform that I want to launch. I have a business model. I just need help. And I'm feeling stuck in that.
And be a little more specific. partner, like give us an idea of what you
You know
mean.
what? It could be a partnership with an organization. It could be a partnership with an individual. It could be board members, that have, it's somebody who has resources, who wants to give and do something wonderful for themselves and with their lives. And I'm happy to share. I have a little video that I made, I'm so happy to open it up. It's my baby, but I just want to help people. Literally, I videotaped a woman a couple weeks ago in rural America who did not have 7 children. She was dying of cancer and did not have access to the internet. Literally, she had to be videotaped by going to her doctor's office. That's how I videotaped her. But
Wow.
I want to be able to reach people like that.
And the nonprofit specifically focuses on what again?
It offers, free clinically guided videotaping for chronically medically ill individuals who want to leave a video legacy. And, when I say clinically guided, people are like, what is that? There's a licensed mental health professional that interviews them. And I actually came up with 200 questions. So each questionnaire is customized to the person based on what they want to talk about.
So beautiful.
That is yeah.
Yeah.
So I know how valuable it's been. People are so grateful, and I just want to share it so much.
Okay, so what you said, how people can find that? I know you
Yeah,
said, okay,
if they contact me. Yeah.
perfect. And then we're gonna have it in our notes, right? We'll
Yes,
have
of
all of
course.
that.
We'll
Yeah.
have
Thank
all
you.
that
Perfect.
information.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Such a pleasure, Michelle, having you on. And we'll
So,
definitely have you on again.
yeah,
Thank
so
you for
nice meeting
sharing
both of you.
all
Absolutely.
your wisdom.
Thank you.
It was great. It was
All right.
great.
All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and we
Bye
will
for
see you
now.
next time. Kisses, hugs. See y'all later.